My name is Brittany Butler, and I am a senior lecturer in the Department of Chemistry. And I'm going to talk about women in STEM and a little bit about gender equality and how that applies to STEM education and careers. And so, my qualifications, I am a woman and I am in STEM. So, a little bit my educational background, I attended Loyola University in New Orleans and got a BS in chemistry, and then a master's in analytical chemistry. And now I'm working on my doctorate in educational leadership and policy analysis, um, looking at a Chem Leaders program that I work with, coordinated with trying to teach some soft skills to chemistry graduate students and undergraduate chemistry majors as well. And so I've been involved as a woman in STEM for many years and probably didn't really get interested in chemistry or science until high school. So it wasn't really something that was on my radar until a little bit later. But just as a disclaimer to today, I know gender is not the only issue or cause of some inequities that we might see in the STEM field, but that's the main one that I'm going to talk about today. And so I hope to discuss the significance of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Um, Present some current statistics as I was preparing for this. There have been some advances that have been made, but there's still a long way to go. And so I was really happy at first, and then it's easy to get a little discouraged as you start to look at some of the data and some of the maybe minute changes that have occurred over the last several years. But there are several barriers and challenges to women in STEM, and that does become more broadly applied to underrepresented minorities, and then talk a little bit about the intersectionality of gender and race. But I hope to shift quickly to strategies and maybe some more positive sides of encouraging girls and women in STEM, and even present some local initiatives that are going on to sort of specifically improve some of the STEM education in our region. And so STEM does apply to a wide range of disciplines and different knowledge areas. And so I like to share this as a quick 4-minute clip from Intel. They're doing a Million Girls Moonshot, and I thought this was pretty inspirational. So let's see.
Hello. You go first.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A veterinarian or a marine biologist or a volcanologist. Paleontologist. I want to be a DJ and a teacher. If a farmer doesn't work for me, I'll go to space.
2, 1, 0.
I was 7 years old when I decided I would go to space. And it all started in a museum. At 26 years old, I became the very first Mexican-born woman in space. So I went to space this past June. I was selected out of 7,000 applicants from all over the world. Throughout my life, I was constantly being convinced that this is not something I actually wanted, because they didn't believe that as a woman, I should be pursuing this type of career.
When you were launching, what did that feel like?
Ooh, I love that question. The hardest part about studying STEM as a minority woman is being a minority woman. In university, I was constantly being told that I didn't belong there.
Stay for humanity, we're here!
The first word I ever said was why, but in Spanish, ¿por qué? When we really look at the root of science, that is science. It's the pursuit of answers. We have seen that it's very prevalent for educators to ask girls simpler questions, like the what questions, and boys, the why question. When you are in space, you feel like you're upside down, but you're not. Now, does anyone know why that happens? A why question requires further thought, requires further analysis. And a what question simply has the answer, and they'll leave it at that. If this has been happening primarily to the girls, then there's a very important skill that is not being developed in their educational journey. Something really important that we are actually seeing already in place to try to make that change are initiatives like Million Girls Moonshot, because it is actually using after-school programs in order to help get girls engaged and motivated about the possibilities of STEM. This is actually being funded by Intel, and this is really important too because it benefits society in general. We already see the impacts that it has on the workforce. It has been scientifically proven that more diverse teams do better. That is science. It has been seen. If we're able to engage these girls from a very young age to get them more interested and feel like they belong and like they are welcome here, then we're really going to start working our way towards equality across the board in all careers and all fields, not just in STEM.
Why do you think both girls and boys can be good at science?
Because they have brains. It just depends on what they're interested in.
Some people think that a specific thing can be just for girls or just for boys, but they can basically be for both genders.
What is the best thing about being a girl?
Being a girl?
And so that's just one of the initiatives that I found in looking at this. And it really struck me. Girls are typically asked what questions, and boys are asked why questions. And so it really does start from a very early age, this difference where performance-wise, there is no evidence that there's a difference in math or science scores between girls and boys, and that how the social impact starts much later when you do start to see some differences. And so just the overall significance of STEM, it drives innovation. We see it in technology, transportation, healthcare, and it helps solve really complex problems. It's going to take STEM to solve world issues like climate change and the career opportunities. STEM, not your average profession, all occupations. The US national wage average about 48,000, whereas STEM occupations much higher, 87,000. Petroleum engineer, 149,000. This was from a petroleum engineering website, so they were definitely trying to highlight that. But even in the education and workforce areas, STEM can, across the board, help emphasize critical thinking and problem solving. And like many other areas, there's the issue of diversity and inclusion within STEM, and just how to build the broader perspective that includes everyone and how we all benefit from diversity. And so there's already a long history of women having a very strong impact in STEM. Women in STEM do change the world. And one idea that I came across, I am going to talk about some other initiatives, but here with all of these famous women mathematicians, geologists, computer scientists, March is Women's History Month. And so organizations, schools, departments can do a STEM Women in History Day or month, right, highlighting some of the contributions. And we'll talk about how important role models are and representation in having women see themselves as scientists, as mathematicians, as engineers. And so like I said, some advances have been made. This is just a graph showing women in selected STEM occupations from 1960 to 2013. And general increase of engineers, chemists, computer and math Biggest gains in biological sciences, and not so actually a decline in your computer and engineering or computer and mathematics. And so, like I said, this is encouraging, but still, this is just percentage of women from US Census Bureau data. And so we are only about 50%, 53% in one of the areas of biological science. Trying to move this out of the way. Another graph, just switching to higher education, the percentage of women faculty members has increased over the past few decades. Percentage of women from 1991 to 2018, but again, not big gains. And some of the one thing that's highlighted here and a little bit later, part-time, right? A lot of women are regulated to part-time work, non-tenure work in terms of post-secondary education, and it's contract work that's not secure and often very time-consuming, and of course, pay differences still exist between full-time and part-time work when compared to their male colleagues. And so there are several disparities, differences to access, participation, and outcomes by gender. And so despite making up nearly half of the US workforce, right, women are still vastly underrepresented in several STEM fields. Men make up 52% of the US workers, but 73% of all STEM workers. And so there is still this earnings gap within STEM occupations, even though women employed full-time year-round in STEM occupations earned more than non-STEM counterparts, but that pay gap still exists even within STEM occupations. And this is, of course, a complicated issue, but several societal factors go into play here. Several cultural factors are at play. And so we can have an entire day spent on all of the areas where we do see gender differences and the reasoning for that. But these are just 10 that I highlighted here. But underrepresentation, again, especially in fields like engineering and computer science, there's small numbers of students, professionals, and researchers, female researchers in these fields. And the educational achievement, there's a term I came across that I hadn't heard of before, actually, the leaky pipeline, a metaphor to try to explain why we do see such few women in STEM. And then within that, there's also a lack of female leadership in education or even the corporate world. Women hold fewer positions as department heads, deans, and presidents of universities, and then executives in the business world. Obviously, the pay gap, implicit biased. There's differences in how women are perceived for the same amount of work, same quality of work as men. And so that has implications in hiring. The work-life balance, women often have a greater family responsibility. And again, the lack of role models. There's a lack of visibility of women in STEM. And again, you can tease that out to women of color, women with disabilities, and all of the other underrepresented identities out there. But with STEM fields being more male dominated, there's often harassment and discrimination issues that women have to deal with, hostile work environments. The STEM culture is seen at times or in places as unwelcoming and exclusionary. And so that might deter women from entering certain fields over others. And then retention and attrition is a huge issue as well. Women are more likely to leave the workforce or the STEM workforce, and that's just a severe loss of talent that really has to be addressed. And so just a note with intersectionality, today, intersectionality has become a versatile term describing this overlapping system of oppression. And so, where class, sexuality, ability, nationality, and religion, in addition to race and gender intersect. And it was first coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw. And she argued that discussions of feminist theory and anti-racism excluded Black women because the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism. And so this idea that it is a really complicated issue, and when you do try to take gender and race and these other issues and come up with solutions, it is challenging and but necessary. And so I mentioned with education, this leaky pipeline. More and more students do not end up pursuing STEM careers, despite an initial interest. And so there are articles or information out there that says maybe kindergarten to before middle school, right? The amount of interest that boys and girls have in science or STEM are about equal. The performance of boys and girls on math tests or science tests, again, are about equal, but there's a diminishing presence of women as STEM graduates and in the STEM workforce. And so this is just an example. In 2001, there were a bit more than 4 million ninth graders. 2.8 million of them graduated. 1.9 went on to 2 or 4 year colleges. Only 1.3 million were actually ready for college work, and then fewer than 300,000 are majoring in STEM fields. And so the numbers just get smaller and smaller. So there's a small pool of STEM graduates to choose from, and so even fewer of those numbers are women. And there's several reasons, there may be several reasons for this, but the stereotypes that we see limit boys and girls equally, right? By assuming boys are expected to be more physical, maybe less intellectual, more interested in sports, right? That does a disservice to boys as well. And whereas girls are expected to be well-behaved, compliant, polite. And so girls are more likely to believe that only boys can be really, really smart, as I would think, especially in subjects like math or science, whereas boys might be discouraged from liking to read or liking to write. And so these stereotypes come into play with some of the societal pressures and discourages not only girls from entering STEM fields, but perhaps discourages boys from being welcoming. And I think I was able to avoid some of these stereotypes and limitations. I just happened to have women math teachers in elementary school and going to an all-girls high school where all the math teachers were also female. There really wasn't any room to say, oh, all girls can't possibly be good or bad at math, right? So I think I dodged a little bit of this, but many girls don't. And so though more than 60% of college graduates are women, right, they face barriers and bias throughout their schooling. And so this idea of tracking in early education might account for the reasoning why so many professions are still highly gendered, and women tend to be not put, but disproportionately present in lower paying fields. Some of the 20 or top 10 or 20 lowest paying jobs have the highest percentage of women in that 18 to 24 sort of working age. And some of the highest paying professions, pulling out STEM professions, have some of the lowest. I believe there's only like 16% of women are engineers. And so from preschool to graduate school, girls and women are unconsciously steered into certain fields of study and away from more lucrative ones. And so this is another statistic, and thanks for sharing that link. Yeah, a lot of this information came from the American Association of University Women, and they try to advance equity for women through the advocacy and education and research. And so, as I mentioned, evidence suggests that gender differences in inherent aptitudes for math and science are negligible, right? They're pretty much non-existent. And so these stereotypes, the a little bit with the imposter syndrome, stereotype threat, but these social and structural reasons for the underrepresented representation of women in academic STEM fields does account for these low percentages of girls who say, okay, yes, I'm going to pursue a STEM career. And that's only between ages of 13 and 17, much higher we see compared to boys. And so I don't know if how many folks are aware of this, but this was in 1992. Barbie came under fire for having a doll that talks and saying that math is tough. So I just wanted to show this real quick.
Totally hot, totally cool, totally hair Barbie. You got the longest hair ever.
For almost 30 years, Barbie's been the undisputed queen of the toy department. Always popular, hugely profitable.
I don't have this one.
But this year, Barbie made a blunder and joined the ranks of everyone else who made big marketing mistakes in 1992.
Do you like toasted marshmallows?
That's the kind of talk we expect from Barbie, innocuous and upbeat.
Let's plan a birthday dance.
But here's the one-liner that got her into big trouble.
Math class is tough.
Math class is tough? Mighty discouraging words from a female role model.
Well, in my opinion, it's portraying like a negative image on school.
Like it looks bad to have someone who's like so famous and all this stuff to say math is tough.
Barbie may be talking, but Mattel isn't.
Somebody at Mattel clearly made a mistake in letting that go through. And the mistake was an error in judgment and not being on top of the times.
So that's even back in 1992, where it's apparent how damaging thoughts or stereotypes, ideas like this can be, I think, to a generation, because I still, remember hearing this, and this wasn't a hard clip to find. And so intent of first year college students to major in STEM fields by gender. Again, you can see several of the STEM fields, more progress in biological and life sciences, certain fields where they have a shift in perception where it seems like, oh, that is a role for women, tend to be underpaid and less supported. One example of that, like nursing, right? Initially, nursing was dominated by men, but once that became viewed as a woman's job, then you see fewer and fewer men in that role. Similar to early childhood education and elementary school teachers are dominated by women, whereas engineering percentage of students, the blue there is men, yellow women. We see much lower percentages, again, in chemistry, math, even fewer in physics. And again, same by rank for female faculty, assistant, associate, full professors. So it's especially bad in computing professors or computing departments and engineering departments, seeing the stark differences. And this is by year from 2004 to 2013, percentage of faculty who are women. And so there is still a very small percentage of women faculty in these STEM departments, but very pronounced once you get to full professors. And so what are these barriers and challenges that we see? So with more than 75% of public school teachers being female and 80% white, there's issues of having all students being able to see themselves as STEM professionals. And teachers, it was found that teachers themselves often have a certain amount of math anxiety. And if this anxiety about math or about science is passed on to girls in particular, then it becomes a challenge for girls to see themselves as capable in math class or science class. And so it's actually been proven that female teachers' math anxiety affects girls' math achievement. And even with the teacher having math anxiety among boys and girls, it doesn't seem to affect the performance of boys, which I thought was pretty interesting. Girls also tend to be harder on themselves when self-assessing the quality of their work. And teachers are harder on girls as well. In the same study, it was found that teachers would grade girls more harshly for the same quality of work and often penalizing girls' work more harshly. The male-dominated STEM culture, like I said, if it's a field that's more set up or more, or what was I trying to say? Or these fields tend to perpetuate more exclusionary or inflexible male-dominated cultures, then women are less likely to show up in those spaces. And so if an area or department is not supportive of women and underrepresented individuals, then this would be a pretty big barrier to increasing the number of women who enter that particular field. And so another issue, just pop culture, books, media, we often don't see women portrayed in these fields. And so we see fewer role models for Black women, Hispanic women, Indigenous populations in math and science portrayed in television, movies. And so because fewer women, like I said, work in these fields, it's really important for there to be some form of representation for younger girls to look up to all the way through post-secondary education. And so what can we actually do to support and encourage girls and women in STEM? There are more women in, and I think folks have probably been attuned to this statistic here for a while, but at most colleges and universities, there are more women attending college now than men. And so, however, women are still at that lower non-tenure track lecturer position across most colleges and universities. And so small percentages of women are at the sort of top of college and university academic ranks, with 36% of full professors of women. And so there's a large percentage of non-tenure track women. And so if we're talking about being role models or having girls and women be exposed to women themselves who are leaders, then there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. All full-time faculty, but tenure and tenure track, we see if women make up the majority of students as in higher education, then those numbers should better reflect the number of tenure or tenure track women we see as faculty. And so girls and women are still not on par with boys and men. And hopefully, as I've shown, it does start very early in childhood. The message that girls are receiving from parents is especially important, but the message that girls and boys receive from teachers, hopefully not perpetuating those stereotypes. And so just being aware, trying to make more people aware of the implicit messages and not perpetuating the idea that boys and men are better at math and science. Again, that's been proven time and time over that there is no inherent difference, and there's no, in terms of math and science ability, boy brain versus girl brain. And again, that issue of intersectionality comes up again, where you have women at a disadvantage in many of these STEM fields, but Black girls and women, Latinas, are even more likely to be dissuaded from pursuing math and science. The discrimination that those populations can face, the resources that underrepresented minorities are coming into schools with, the resources they're coming into the workplace with, right? And again, having those role models present to them in person or even in pop culture. And so one of the obvious things that we can do is start early, right? Exposing girls to STEM learning environments from pre-K all the way through high school, and to maintain the interest that girls have already been shown to have, and to encourage their self-efficacy and ability in STEM fields, especially mathematics. High school is another critical time. Again, I think with myself attending an all-girls high school, when I took chemistry, it was not uncommon to have several high-achieving other high school girls around me. And so it wasn't an issue of having attention being split between girls and boys, but they could encourage us sort of equally. And so I think that is a critical time to build skills and confidence in these, what are seen as more difficult fields. Another thing that came up, emphasizing communal goals. So one aspect of encouraging girls to pursue education, professions in the STEM fields was emphasizing all the ways that these areas can help others, right? And having opportunities for practice and informal exposure to STEM activities, STEM education, fostering engagement among key stakeholders and key entities. These type of low pressure learning environments, again, where these stereotypes are not going to be reinforced, but everyone equally encouraged, would be a way to maybe start turning the tide a little bit more with increasing the number of women in STEM and decreasing that leaky pipeline. Again, just recalling that retention and attrition is still a big issue for many women in STEM fields. Some of the initiatives that I found that are going on, one that I really liked was the National STEM or STEAM Day, November 8th. And why November 8th? It's because if you abbreviate November to NOV and then add the 8, it's like innovate. It's a stretch maybe, but innovation. And so they relate this to STEM. And so celebrating this day would help encourage kids to explore their interests in the fields of STEM. And then some recent addition to STEM is art. So now it's STEAM, and I think I've even seen STREAM now. And I think that stands for, I think, reading. So there's STEAM, STREAM. And so to me, I won't get on my pedestal, but that's just education at that point. And so, but encouraging girls and boys, right, to just be interested in this area would be a good thing. And then again, that American Association of University Women has several ideas for taking action to try to advance gender equity and create a more economical, secure world for women and girls. And even they have several, I think that's the link there for Get Empowered. They have several informational resources that women can use if you're going in to talk about maybe a raise or just something to try to address that pay gap in several different fields. So right here at ETSU, we have the Center for Excellence in STEM Education as a partnership with the Northeast Tennessee STEM Innovation Hub and with the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network. And so this is the Center for STEM Innovation right here that capitalizes on robust STEM assets and tries to disseminate pedagogical practices throughout the region. So they provide professional development opportunities, conference opportunities, so folks can get together who are interested in this topic of trying to increase the number of just students in general who are pursuing STEM fields. And I think it's very important, like we said, with such of the emphasis being on women early educators, having a lending library of STEM activities that they can check out essentially and use in the classroom to expose all kids to STEM activities and get their interest and involvement in these fields early on. And I think we had a student participate, a chemistry undergraduate student participate with this last summer, but the Langston Center does have a after-school program that incorporates educational approaches from STEM and STEAM, and they have tutors that engage students after school with educational experiences. And I think this is a particularly good one. It's free for grades 3 through 8, and would be a great after-school program. And like I said, some of our chemistry majors have volunteered with this program. And so it not only gives our students an opportunity to have those volunteer hours, but hopefully encourage younger students to see themselves as chemistry, physics, math majors. Also, availability of technology is always a big issue. And so having access to computers, the Carver Recreation Center has an open hour for ages 6 through 18 that they open access to their computer lab. And so with one of the lowest percentages of women in computing, right? This is another area that getting younger girls interested in computers, coding at an early age, I think would help to boost the numbers we see in those sort of data analytic fields. There's an Eastman Scholar Math Elites and Science Elites program. And so this, again, is putting the focus on some of the opportunities that teachers can find. They will provide professional learning in math and science for educators in this area. And I believe they have academies with 2 of the elementary schools in Kingsport. And so, again, just dealing with maybe that math and science anxiety that some teachers have and might inadvertently pass along to their students. The American Chemical Society has a committee on women chemists. And again, their vision is to engage, advance, and advocate for women. One of the areas I didn't really have time to get into, but there are several policy initiatives that are out there to try to improve not only the pay gap among women in STEM, but just the involvement of women in leadership positions, and again, help improve the numbers. And so there are several articles highlighting issues for women in STEM and again, this is from the ACS Committee on Women. And so highlighting influential women in chemistry, or I'm sure similar articles exist for engineering, technology, physics, biology, things of that nature. And again, representation. So as many ways as we can try to get younger girls and women to see themselves in these fields would help to improve the representation and involvement of women. But seeing some of the challenges and acknowledging and bringing more awareness to the challenges that women face and marginalized groups face. And so having an area for women in STEM to get their questions answered, find resources, and I think more importantly, connect with other women in STEM is one of the goals here. I think a lot of these organizations are trying to do. Again, the positive side is that these resources are plentiful. There are several different organizations out there who are discipline specific, but they do provide a lot of resources for women. It's just a matter of making those available, I think, at a younger and younger age to get students involved. Lastly, I like to plug my next presentation, but I can kind of see this going hand in hand, but the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Department has a Women on Wednesdays series that I'll be presenting on Zoom again Wednesday, November 1st. But I've been really interested lately in this idea of promoting, developing, or fostering a science identity. And how do students see themselves as a scientist? How do they see themselves as a biologist? And so I think this would, developing this science identity would go a long way into empowering students across the board in STEM fields. And so that's just a little plug that'll be coming up here a little bit later. But more and more boys and girls, I think around the middle school age, if you ask them to draw a scientist, it used to be, okay, the geeky scientist guy with the lab coat and glasses, right? But they're seeing that more and more classrooms are drawing women as scientists. You're just getting a more diverse picture of what a scientist can be. So I hope to look at that idea of science identity here. And I just did a quick Google search of scientists, right? I was interested to see what came up. And I think this is encouraging, right? We do see different genders, different races. You have Einstein down there. But I know typically in the past, this wasn't always the case where you would see a diversity of pictures being portrayed when you try to search images of a scientist. And I was just checking to make sure everybody is wearing their goggles, and I think they're okay, because I think this is just like some lettuce down there or something. So that's pretty good. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I thank you all for your attendance and your time.
Go ahead. Dr. Barton, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, I have two questions. One is, Brittany, do you think, this is way back, so don't try to find this slide, but it's the bar chart of, I think it's students going into the different STEM fields, and we see an increase of women in the biological sciences. Do you think that's pre-med and nursing showing up there, or do you know if that's included? I wonder what your thoughts are about that, and if that's why we see higher rates there versus some of the other fields.
I don't know if nursing was specifically included in that. One chart I did find where they had teased out some of the professions. Pharmacists. There was one statistic, I think it was like 80% women in pharmacy. So pharmacy is a field that has seen a large increase in women attending pharmacy school. And so that profession is almost becoming way of the nurses.
Interesting. That's going to be both chemistry and biology there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I have one other, it's a remark, maybe a question for discussion, but I thought that page on resources for women in chemistry, those articles, is interesting. And I'm a little torn between the idea that it's useful to have those resources clear and available for women in the field to be able to find quickly and easily, versus having them integrated in all of the articles about chemistry, because I think the risk of setting them aside just for women means men aren't reading those articles. That's not for us to learn about women in STEM. It's not for us to learn about the importance of relationships in chemistry. You know what I mean? And so it continues to push to the side or marginalize perhaps the issues that women find important in STEM, because it's not entering the general dialogue.
Yeah,
Just a thought.
that's really interesting, because I think the AC, I know about the ACS, they have the different areas sort of partitioned for the different groups on gender, LGBTQ studies and things like that. But the articles definitely were only under sort of the Women Chemist Committee, but they do sponsor webinars and other series. And so they'll be sponsored and issues related to women, but that is available across the board. But then again, they do tend to be more broad topics at the same time that would be applicable. And so, yeah, I could see having those resources at the forefront for everyone. And that'd be interesting to see what sort of difference that would make.
And you talked a lot about how starting women early. With the recent DEI legislation, like targeting a lot of higher ed programs, what are other pathways that we can do to make sure that these young women are able to have access to a lot of these pipeline programs?
Yeah, and I've run into that, I think, on many levels, where they have organizations, they have funding, they have programs out there, but how do you get it to the right audience? How do you get the word out there? It seems to me that that's where some of the difficulty lies. I'm not sure, right? I don't know because I don't think this even has to be couched in a diversity and inclusion lens in terms of, for example, like the Langston, but maybe it being at the Langston Center is enough to raise a red flag on some of these programs, unfortunately, where if there's that image that if it's, at a location like that, then even if it is a STEM program, then maybe it's, a perception of pushing an agenda or something like that. But in terms of just STEM activities and trying to increase students' practice with things like critical thinking and problem solving, right? That should be something available to everyone, boys and girls. And mostly from what I saw, it's the early education, the sort of social issues, cultural issues, they just don't affect boys as much as they affect girls. And so introducing any sort of intervention like teacher training or supplemental STEM programs, I think it can only help both boys and girls, and hopefully increase the pipeline or increase the number of women to at least get close to equity, in terms of, what we see in some of these now more male dominated fields.
Thank you. I love the statistics, all of the graphics that you provided. This was a really wonderful presentation. Does anyone have any other questions for soon-to-be Dr. Butler?
Yes.
I just want to say I did look at the gender stats in your department, Britt, while you were talking.
Okay.
They support your claims.
That's, yeah. Yeah, that's it's complicated, right? You don't know if what sort of factor goes into perpetuating that, especially when you try to factor in all of these other data points. But yeah, it does match pretty well to the to the graphs. So.
Well, if there are no more questions, we're going to give you back your last 5 minutes. Please know that her presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube page and our platform. And let's also support soon-to-be Dr. Butler at her Women on Wednesday on November 1st. Thank you again for attending our Lunch and Learn. Also saw many of you at the conference. Thank you for being in participation with us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next one on October 31st with Brittany Dye. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.